There's an ancient saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And Graham Cooke has traveled many miles in his life. But over 30 years ago, he was on a very different path than the one he's on today.
I was on the run from the police at the time, and I'd been walking for a couple of days. I basically didn't want the life I had anymore. I was walking 270 miles to find my prison visitor who'd left my hometown. He'd moved to the south coast, and I knew he lived on the coast. So my big plan was to walk until I hit the beach and then turn left or right. That was my plan. So I walked about 100 miles in 2 or 3 days, and it was rain the whole time, and I was just looking for shelter, crossing some fields from a freeway to try and find like a barn or something, And I met God in the middle of the field, and it was a physical thing. But I saw this shadow, which I know it sounds stupid. And I remember thinking it was a policeman, because I'd broken my parole by then. I'm thinking it's a policeman. I can't go back to prison, I can't go back. So basically I was going to punch his lights out, So I kept moving back and he kept moving forward, and eventually I couldn't move my legs. So I just gritted my teeth and I clenched my fist, and I'm thinking, I'm ready for you. But I couldn't keep my fist clenched. And I couldn't stop my face from breaking into a smile, and I didn't know what was happening. And all I know is I felt this arm around my shoulder and this breath in my ear. He just said, tell me everything. And I told him everything I ever did.
The next morning, he awoke in the field and once again encountered the miraculous.
Then I woke up in the morning, I'm lying under a hedge. And it rained during the night, of course. The ground I'm lying on is dry. The hedge above me is dry. It's warm, it's sunny. I feel like I've just eaten a 3-course meal. I hadn't eaten for 3 days. It's the best day of my life. I step onto the wet ground. It's cold, it's raining, I'm starving hungry. And I realize I've broken parole and I'm on my way to find someone. I don't even know where he lives. I step back onto dry ground. It's warm, it's sunny, I'm full, I haven't a care in the world. I spend 45 minutes jumping from wet ground to dry ground, thinking, I don't know what's happening, but I want to stay in this place. And I realize I can't live on a patch of ground in a farmer's field for the rest of my life. So I walked back to the freeway, and I'd been using this thumb for like 3 days and it hadn't worked. And I stick my thumb out and a guy stops in like a minute. He's not only going all the way south, he's actually going to the very town I'm trying to get to. Not only that, but he drives right past the very road. And he knows it. And all I know is I finally find this address, I knock on the door, and opens, and there's my prison visitor. He looks at me and says, what are you doing here? And what on earth has happened to you? And I told him about it, told him everything. He looked at me and said, Graham, you just met Jesus. And he said his name, and I burst into tears. I hadn't cried since I was 3 years old. And I said, really? He said, you just met Jesus, and you've just had your first encounter with the kingdom of heaven.
In many ways, his conversation with God and encounters with him have never stopped. It's what makes up Cooke's ministry as a writer, pastor, and prophetic teacher. And though his first encounter with God was extraordinary, Cooke says hearing his voice isn't. It's called the prophetic, and it's part of his daily life.
It's really interesting that people say that they're Bible-believing, but they don't know how to hear the voice of God. And it's not like God wrote a book and stopped talking. I mean, what is that? That just makes me giggle. I think God is always talking. And the promise of Jesus is, my sheep know my voice.
Hearing God's voice isn't always easy, especially in a world of noise and endless distractions. But taking the time can make all the difference. And he says what God has to say is profound, life-giving, and often surprising. Cooke spends up to 4 months a year meditating, And that's where the bulk of his teaching and insights come from.
I began to learn in that whole time that the antidote to my past is not my present being sorted out, it's me understanding my future. It's like God wants to take you from your past to your future, to show you who you are becoming. And then what happens is, He shows you, this is why I love prophecy, He shows you who you're going to be, and then He lays out this pathway for you to get there.